So the last topic that I want to cover in this module is, as we're looking at these different kind of very active fields in current research and practice in music technology, is networked music. And we're going to look, again, this is an extremely broad field. So I want to focus in on three particular areas of network music in this video. We're looking at shared sonic environments, collaborative composition systems, and laptop orchestras. But before we do that, I want to ask what network music actually is. And I want to start off with this claim, which is that pretty much all music is actually networked music. And what I mean by that is that whenever musicians are playing together, they're creating a network because there's musician 1 here, and musician 2, and say musician 3, and there's sound going that way, and there's sound going that way, and there's sound going this way and this way, and obviously sound going this way and this way as well. And then there's also a visual communication that's happening between everybody. So I'm not going to draw all the arrows here, but you can see things going back and forth visually between each musician as well. And so as we look at these connections, they're essentially forming a network with each other, with these aural and these visual connections linking them together. But when we're talking about networked music as a kind of field, we're a little bit more specific. We're talking about a musical experience in which the way the musicians are connected together becomes integral to a musical work or a musical experience. So we start moving beyond just those traditional aural and visual connections of a bunch of musicians sitting in the same room together, and we start thinking about different ways to either extend or replace or transform those connections. For instance, if two musicians are playing with each other, but they're located in different cities and they're connected over some kind of internet connection, their relationship is going to change. They may still be seeing a video of each other, and they may still be hearing each other, but there's certain things that the network does, like delaying the sound ever so slightly with some latency, that's going to radically change how they are able to play together. So network music is about all these different situations in which we're consciously transforming these connections amongst musicians and transforming their experience of making music together. So in terms of why we would want to do this, the most common reason is really a practical one, that we want to make music with people, but we're separated either geographically, I'm in Atlanta and I want to jam with someone who's in New York, or we're displaced over time. I want to compose a piece of music with some friends of mine and all do it together, but we can't all sit in a room for a weekend and do this together. So I'm going to write a little part and then send it on to someone else who's going to write a little part and on and on and on. And we're going to kind of work over time that way. Another reason people might want to do network music is that they want to preserve an anonymous identity. They want to collaborate with other musicians, but for whatever reason, they don't want those musicians to know who they are. So behind a network, there are ways, obviously, to protect your identity and to remain anonymous. And another reason, perhaps a little bit more esoteric, but potentially very interesting, is an interest in creating musical structure that actually is derived somehow from the structure of the network, whether it's that latency that happens when people are communicating across the internet at a distance, or particular ways that different musicians in the network are connected to each other or disconnected from each other, or the data they're sending is being mediated somehow. Somehow that musical structure is inspired somehow or based on or built from the structure of the network that is connecting the musicians together. So now I want to go and talk about these three areas I mentioned at the beginning of the video in a little bit more detail. The first one is shared sonic environments. I really like this term. It was coined about 10 years ago or so by Alvaro Barbosa. And the idea of it is that there's some kind of public, online, real-time musical collaboration environment. It's focused on improvisation. It's focused on people making music together in the moment. They may not know who each other are. They may have met before. They may not have. They may have come together by plan or kind of completely randomly. But it's like a giant jam session on the internet where people are coming together and making this music and improvising and trying to make something cool as they're collaborating together simultaneously. It's open usually to anyone to join and participate. And not only can anyone join, but it's often kind of irrespective of the musical experience, because these shared sonic environments are often coupled with some unusual kind of musical interface or way of making music, so that just about anyone can contribute something musically, even if they don't play a traditional instrument. So one of the classic examples of a shared sonic environment was this piece that Max Neuhaus, an American sound artist, did back in 1977 called RadioNet. And this was done for the National Public Radio System in the United States. It was done on a Sunday afternoon as a 2-hour live radio broadcast. And about 25,000 people across the country telephoned into a series of call-in numbers they were given, and they were asked to whistle. So they telephoned in and they whistled into the phone. And then Max built a bunch of analog equipment that took these whistling sounds and processed them in real time. So some of it was mixing each different caller at a different volume level based on some analysis of the frequency of the whistling. And then some of it was creating a delay line, like the delay plugin that we looked at back in Module 2 in Reaper. But this was a very unusual delay line because he actually created it with these white lines here that we see on this diagram. These white lines represent telephone connections that connected different NPR stations across the country to each other. And so what Max did was he connected these in a loop so that he would send these whistling sounds out over this telephone loop. And they would come back after a certain delayed time, and the process of them going across all these telephone connections, they'd lose some amplitude in the process as well. So then as soon as they came back to the source, they get sent out again. So it would feed back over and over and over again, just like a feedback delay line. And each time it went through, it would also go through a frequency shifter that would shift the frequency of these whistling sounds down and down and down. And so as these things were going through this feedback delay, they were repeating over and over and over again. They were going down and down and down in pitch, and they were gradually dying out. And so I want to give you a sense of this, the sonic result of all of this. I just want to play a brief excerpt of this broadcast from 1977. What it sounded like is all these people were calling in and whistling, and they were getting mixed through this automated equipment and feedback delayed and pitch shifted. So that gives you a sense of what it sounded like. Another shared sonic environment I want to point out, in particular because it's actually bundled with Reaper, so you actually have it on your computer already, is something called Ninjam. And this was originally developed as a standalone product by Cocos, the company that makes Reaper, in the mid-2000s. And now it exists as a plugin inside of Reaper. So you can go and add this to the master track or to an individual track in Reaper as you wish, and an interface like this will pop up. And this particularly was designed to deal with the issues of latency that happen when people are kind of jamming together at a distance over a network. It might take 5 or 10 or 20 or even more milliseconds for the sound I'm creating to reach you. And that might not sound like a lot, but as we get into 20 or 50 or 100 milliseconds, it's going to become very hard for us to play in time sync with each other. Because everything I hear from you is going to be late, everything you hear from me is going to be late. And so Ninjam takes a kind of an unusual approach to addressing this situation, but rather than trying to reduce the latency as much as possible, it actually increases the latency. And it does that so that everyone will always play in perfect time sync with each other, but they're off by one measure. So when I send my audio to you, Ninjam just kind of holds on to it until we get to the beginning of the next measure, and then it starts playing at the next measure. So our beats are always in perfect sync. We're always aligned to the timing grid perfectly, but we're always hearing things exactly one measure off from each other. So this solves the problem of playing in time sync perfectly. It introduces a whole bunch of other interesting problems about playing in terms of melodic and harmonic progression in particular, since everyone's off by a measure from everyone else. But again, those are interesting things that we look at, maybe not as limitations in the field of network music, but as opportunities to shape the musical experience and the music that we're creating. So the interface here is very simple. You basically see all of your local audio channels here that you want to put in, and these might be coming from tracks on Reaper. They might be coming through a microphone input, or you're plugging in your guitar or whatever it might be. And over here you can see the remote channels. So these are all the channels you're hearing that are coming from users that are elsewhere on the internet. Up here there's a metronome, so you can set the meter and you can set the beats per minute, and that's shared amongst everyone. And then down here is a text chat window, so you can try to coordinate with other people what you're doing. So you can try to kind of plan musically what's going on through that text chat. So I want to move on now to collaborative composition systems. And they're very different from these shared sonic environments. The notion behind these is that there's a collaboration that's unfolding out of real time. So people are not all working simultaneously making music, but this might happen over hours or days or weeks or years even. And that it's focused on creating a composition together, on some music that's going to result some final product, rather than just on kind of improvising or jamming in the moment. It may be geared towards novices, it may be a private community, or it may be a public one. It just kind of varies from system to system. But I wanted to talk about a couple of examples very quickly of these collaborative composition systems. The first one is a project of mine. This is a piece that I worked on a few years ago called Piano Etudes. There's a bunch of different musical fragments in these etudes that are represented by these little boxes. The piece can be played basically any way that you want by starting on some box and then going to another one that's connected by an arrow, and another one, and another one. Just kind of following these connections amongst all these arrows to create your own path through the piece. And so then what I did was I created a website where anyone who wants to can go and kind of choose your own adventure, if you will, and build your own version of the piece. So you can click on these and preview what they sound like, and if you like it, then you can add it. And then from there, I can see these green ones are the places I can go next. And maybe I'll repeat that twice. And then from there, I can go up there. And so I'm starting to build this piece here, and I can play what I have on this timeline. And I could build a whole version of this piece that might last several minutes this way. And once I have that, I can share it with other people online. I can enable them to go in and modify or extend what I've done to create a derivative work from mine. And then I can also print out a musical score that a pianist can then take. That's a representation of what I've done in traditional music notation. A pianist can take and perform on a concert. And so what we've done with this is invited people to create their own versions of the pieces, and then looked over the contributions, and pianists, when they go to perform this, have actually selected versions that they particularly like and presented those in live performance. There's a collaboration that's happening here between me creating these fragments and this kind of structure on this website, all the different people that are coming and creating their own versions and then sharing them, other people that might be creating derivative versions from what they've created, and then pianists, they're looking at that, the versions that have been created, picking some of them, and adding their own musical interpretation and expressivity to them as they perform them. Another example of a collaborative composition environment is one we talked about already way back in Module 2 called ccmixter.org. And when we looked at a CC Mixter, we were originally looking at it primarily as a source of Creative Commons licensed audio content. But CC Mixter is much more than that. It's really a community of musicians. And when you upload music to CC Mixter, you're strongly encouraged not just to upload the final MP3 mixdown of that piece that you've made, but to upload all the tracks individually, all the individual sounds you used to create it, all the source content basically, so that someone can then come in and take not just your whole song and build a remix of it, but take individual elements of it down to individual sounds or individual tracks, and maybe take elements from other people's songs in the community and recombine these into a new composition. And CC Mixter enables people to trace these kind of derivations and to see how something gets used somewhere else and somewhere else and somewhere else and somewhere else. And so this entire community has developed around this idea of sharing content and kind of constantly grabbing other people's material and remixing it this way. So the final thing I want to talk about as an example of networked music and network performance are laptop orchestras. And these have become incredibly popular, especially on college campuses in recent years. And a laptop orchestra, if you don't know what it is, it's pretty much exactly what you think. It's a bunch of people performing on laptops in a kind of orchestral configuration. So there might be 5 people in the laptop orchestra, there might be 50, there might be 100. Each laptop might be running the same software in a given piece, or where each laptop musician might be taking on a different role. There might be a kind of orchestration that happens here, similar to in a traditional orchestra. But every piece for laptop orchestra is kind of unique, building off of this basic idea of I've got a bunch of people playing on laptops. What am I going to do with that? But a number of things that people do end up involving network connections amongst the musicians in very important and critical ways. So within a laptop orchestra, there's obviously the traditional aural and visual connections amongst the musicians, but they're also typically connected via Wi-Fi. And so the Wi-Fi connections and the data exchanged across that wireless network might be, for as simple of a purpose, is simply sharing a time synchronization amongst the musicians. So they're playing according to a common tempo and meter in sync. It might be enabling them to exchange chat messages with each other about what they're doing, to plan and kind of work through things. It might be trying to structure a performance as if it's a multiplayer game where the musicians are actually competing against each other in a game-like environment, but as they're competing and playing this game, they're actually creating the music of the piece as well, based on their activities in the game. It may be about them sending each other musical content. That might be in the form of audio files. It might be in the form of MIDI data. It might be in the form of a musical score, or it might even be in the form of code. If they're doing a kind of live coding environment, they might actually be swapping code fragments with each other. All this stuff might be happening over this wireless network as they're performing together, and different pieces in the laptop orchestra repertoire have explored all of these ideas. So to review what we've covered in this video, we've talked about 3 different incarnations of network music. We've talked about shared sonic environments, collaborative composition systems, and laptop orchestras. And there's many other things that people do with networks to make music. Multi-location performances, for instance, where 2 musicians or ensembles are in different locations in 2 different performance venues, and they're collaborating over usually a high-speed audio and video connection to perform together. Or network sonification. We talked about data sonification in Module 5. What if we actually try to sonify network traffic, either to monitor the performance of networks or to learn something about their structure, or just to make interesting music? All these are different areas of inquiry that are active fields of research in network music. So in the next video, we're going to try to kind of wrap up the course and talk about some broad themes and where you might go next as you continue your own exploration of the field of music technology.